The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, we're still waiting for a few people to join in. So we'll promptly start the webinar in another couple of minutes. Please stay tuned. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. This is Abhiraj from edynamic. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. So today we are going to talk about how we can drive revenue through digital using tactics such as personalization and data. And in starting today's session, I'll briefly talk about a few key things before we dive into personalization and how that can aid in a revenue uplift scenario. I'll spend briefly a few minutes talking about the importance of revenue as a metric around digital marketing efforts of organizations, and why everybody knows that revenue is important, yet there are certain key factors that tend to get missed in the conversation and get lost in translation when we talk about setting some benchmarks and some KPIs around revenue. I'll then talk about how personalization can create real-life situations and scenarios where you can virtually see digital making a significant impact in terms of conversions, revenue, and higher customer engagement. And I'll help explain this through certain examples. And then I'll briefly touch upon the concept of a digital revenue engine, what it really is, and how it works, and how it is not very complicated to set up and run in order to get to better KPIs with respect to revenue. And finally, I'll wind up by talking about what are some of the first steps that organizations should take when they go down this route, and why it's not as complicated as it sounds, and it could be a matter of a few weeks before you can start seeing results using a balanced and logical approach with respect to personalization and overall revenue impact. So to start with, I'll talk about the importance of revenue and why it is the most important metric from a marketing standpoint and from a marketing and sales standpoint for any organization. And while most of you would be familiar with a lot of these indicators, but the fact is that even today, largely in most organizations, marketing may be tasked with certain influence on revenue, but they really fail to come up with the right indicators which can aid in establishing marketing as the chief revenue influencer in the organization. So while a lot of us know about the fact that how we can look at metrics such as the number of qualified leads generated, or the number of qualified subscriptions generated, or how we can measure certain programs' effectiveness through tying it back to what we achieved out of the program. But larger metrics such as revenue generated overall, or customer experience metrics like loyalty and satisfaction, although they are very important and they are highly ranked as indicators for revenue, but there are very few marketing organizations that are actually going about measuring these actively on a quarter-to-quarter basis. And on that same thought, the effectiveness of any marketing program and the impact on revenue can be looked at the kind of conversations that might happen at the start of every financial year when marketing goes and asks for budgets. Very often the conversation leads towards how much conversions have we achieved, and is there a justifiable dashboard that shows that actually those conversions have been achieved. Similarly, in a lot of organizations, there's always back and forth between marketing and sales with respect to whether the leads were good enough from a B2B perspective. From a B2C perspective, it's more about have we influenced the path of the customer leading to either a conversion or a purchase? Oftentimes, there are conversations to the effect that marketing feels that the aftermath of demand generation is not strong enough, meaning that probably the leads have not really been effectively followed through upon or tracked, and the sales answer to a lot of those kind of queries is that, well, we aren't really getting what we want. So and marketing has other different challenges. At other times they may be looking at the length of time to convert a prospect into a customer. That might be too long. From a consumer marketing perspective, the right impact of different channels on the overall quality of demand generated is often misplaced because the data is not in place to be able to get that information. So while these are all useful conversations to have, and it's important to challenge the marketing organization every year, but the fact still remains that despite knowing that these are the important indicators of healthy revenue growth, there are very few marketing organizations that are truly measuring each of these points effectively to be able to come up with compelling answers with respect to revenue impact. And around the world, there are enough data points that suggest that if your demand generation is not truly driving revenue, then obviously there's something which is going wrong. And although a large number of companies have listed that qualified leads are their top goal, but really there are very few organizations that are measuring against qualified leads. And the reason for that is the definition of qualified leads in itself is misplaced. It differs from one company to another and one model to another. The truth is that there is only one kind of qualified leads, whether it's B2C or B2B. A lead that actually results in active engagement and customer influencing and customer nurturing is really a qualified lead, and you can attach scores to that effect. But largely the idea is that although the facts are known, the metrics are not really recognized in terms of how demand gen must be more effective in driving revenue. If you look at India and the data around some of the things pertaining to what customers are actually doing and what they prefer. In India alone, there is data which suggests that close to 85 to 90% of customers or end consumers do mention that personalization plays a key role in their purchase decisions. And whenever any kind of consumers get personalized attention, whether it is communication, whether it is offers or recommendations, the probability of conversions goes up significantly. And that's not to say that brands are not doing it, but the fact is that a lot of this effort is very siloed in nature. And later on in this session, I'll give you some examples to suggest how brands are struggling to keep up with what the customer expectations are in terms of personalization. And one of the big reasons behind that is that it's a very competitive scenario out there. So in India alone, although brands are talking about multi-channel marketing, brands are talking about omni-channel customer experience and personalization, there is a handful of companies that are actually able to do this with some amount of conviction and some amount of results. An average consumer spends 22 websites to buy a consumer product in India, and may go up to as many as 15 or more site visits before actually making a purchase on your site. And that's from a consumer perspective. From a B2B perspective, there are end customers who really don't know how and where to start when they come to your website, where again personalization can play a key role, especially at the top of their journeys, or in the fact that people might be flipping between devices, but is the experience on those devices aptly personalized by brands, so that if I go to your app, it doesn't speak a different language than, as compared to when I go to your website. More again from a B2C perspective, there's high abandonment, whether it's an actual transaction or an add to cart kind of scenario, or just a selection scenario where, let's say, if I'm choosing between different card products, the overall abandonment ratio is extremely high. And one of the big reasons for that is that leading up to that experience point, the personalization has not really occurred at the level at which probably customers are demanding it to occur. Largely through, inward-facing forces, a lot of organizations are unable to really personalize the way that they would want personalization to occur. Whether it's in their demand generation programs, or whether it's just surfacing the right kind of experiences through apps or websites, personalization has faced big entry barriers. And one of the big things around personalization is that there is generally it's difficult to get executive buy-in till you show some proof points, and you can only show proof points when you actually try this out. It's hard to pinpoint value till you actually try this out. And that executive buy-in has a big role in preventing personalization on happening at an enterprise scale across customer-facing properties. Secondly, the big thing is that personalization cannot happen piecemeal, because when we talk about a customer's journey going from different devices and across different stages, you cannot have your website personalized, but then your email is talking a different language. So, it's something which needs to be factored in across the journey and across devices. Otherwise, it's of no use whatsoever and leads to fragmented experiences for customers. And then finally, people feel that, having spoken to so many marketers, in India, outside of India, what I've felt always is that marketers feel that this is some kind of a mirage. It's hard to achieve because A, I don't have the people to do it. B, I don't have the tools to do it. C, I don't, my data is all over the place. Well, guess what? Every second marketer faces those same challenges in every organization, but that doesn't deter people from starting out. So one of the things that we would emphasize on as part of today's session is that it's not as hard as it seems. Yes, there are certain things that need to be done and need to be done right for personalization to happen. But by not doing those things, you're not really giving yourself an opportunity to make a revenue impact. There are many examples, that we can talk about of how brands and businesses have adopted personalization, and now they swear by personalization in order to get the desired outputs from revenue or conversions perspective. Scanlines is a popular example that we use with a lot of our customers in the consumer travel space, where their biggest pain point was that they are a company that runs cruises and maritime-based leisure services, and they had very poor conversion on one particular segment, which was around day trips. They had huge bounce rates on day trip campaigns, and what they decided was that if there's some way in which we can get this bounce rate to under 35%, then the project will basically pay for itself. So they embarked on a 2-week project, which was specifically only around Google AdWords campaigns, and they decided to apply personalization. The objective was very simple: drive conversions, drive revenue. And the project was very effective to implement, very low cost to implement, because it was just 2 weeks of work. And the kind of results that they saw at the end of this project was that They did exceptionally well in reducing bounce, which was a big factor in preventing conversions earlier. Whatever they spent got paid off in just 2 weeks by reducing the bounce, just that single metric. And it was done in like 2 to 3 weeks. And they saw measurable impact. They saw a jump in conversions, at a very, very low cost of execution. So the point that, again, I'm trying to make is that it's not as hard as it seems if the basics are done right and if the objectives are very clearly set out from a marketing organization's perspective. And the big thing about personalization is, like I said, it's not something that can be done in silos. So if somebody like a Joanne is applying for a credit card, she will go through what looks like a pretty complex journey, starting from probably a social site or Google search or a review site or just basically word of mouth, and then hitting the internet from her phone, and then really commencing her journey, during which time she'll look at various brands, various products. She'll look at reviews, ratings, testimonials. She'll flip between her phone, her desktop, etc., etc. And there will be other channels which will come into play when she goes on this search for her card, which could be around email, it could be around push notifications, it could be around text messages, or social ads or retargeting ads. So in all of this, if there is somebody who comes in and says that, look, I can only personalize my email and little else, then obviously it's better not to do it that way, because it will not lead to anywhere in your quest for improving a revenue impact. So how do we start on personalization, and really what goes into it? Basically, it's very straightforward when we talk about measurable results and going from one step to the other without really looking at boiling the ocean. 3 steps to start, very simple. The first step is something that a lot of marketing organizations have already been doing. For most that have been using Google Analytics or some other form of digital analytics, the concept of goals can be very identifiable one for marketers. If you attach some scores to each of these goals, first define the goals, and then attach scores to these goals, whether it's on your website, whether it's in your app, or on email, or on any advertising that you're running externally. And once you've set those goals and you've put in your scoring mechanism there, that's your first step done and dusted. The second step comes around rules-based personalization, where we'll demonstrate today how you can use a set of very basic, very simple rules that everybody, you and I, and everybody in the marketing world is aware of, and just have the right orchestration in place to drive more personalized experiences based on those rules. And the third part, which is slightly more advanced in nature, again not extremely hard to achieve, is around doing some profiling, or what we call a segmentation, and then doing some predictive personalization. So I'll walk you through each of these at a high level today, so that you get a very good idea. And I'll start this piece of the session by talking about a brand that really embraced personalization and saw some amazing results over a short period of time. And the brand that we're talking about is one that focuses on baby foods, or foods for infants, newborns, and toddlers. This is a global brand by the name of Danone, and their product, which is in question, is called Nutricia, which is all about early life nutrition products. So the way they went about it is by first mapping out their key objectives, right? So their strategic objective, from a brand standpoint, was to make Nutricia as the brand of choice for parents, and especially mothers of newborns and infants. That was the core objective, and that translated to certain marketing objectives, like how do we ensure that Nutricia is the number one choice is by increasing our membership or subscription, by generating more demand, and thirdly, hopefully, be able to convert a lot of that demand into actual conversions and transactions from a commerce standpoint. And then these marketing objectives fell through into more tangible digital goals, which will be applicable from a demand generation perspective or a digital marketing perspective. So by increasing the acquisition of more subscribers or people who don't mind getting communication about Nutritia, which is a big sign about customer engagement. So it was all about subscription or membership signups, right? The second was around the second digital goal was around a very specific tool that they wanted to use, which was care line interactions, which is a customer support line where people who have queries about the product or want to know more about the product can dial a phone number and speak to a representative from Danone and get to know more about the product. So the number of calls made indicated the engagement. The third was to visit their actual web store or web shop where they were selling these products. And the fourth was the actual purchases. So these were the four simple digital goals that were created that would feed into the marketing objectives and overall drive the strategic brand objective. As a next step, what was done was that based on these digital goals, there were certain scores that were assigned to each goal. So, for instance, a care line chat number, or a care line contact outreach through a mobile app or through email would evaluate to 25 points, which would be equivalent to 25 points. And if somebody completes their online purchase, that will be equivalent to 15 points. If somebody has used an online tool on the website or the app, for example, I need nutrition advice or I need a product recommendation around if my child has specific allergies or if I want to generate a specific recipe, etc., those would equate to 5 points, and so on. And finally, the maximum number of points to if a membership sign up is confirmed. So this pyramid of scores was created around each of the digital goals that were identified. And once this was put into action, just by measuring what people were doing on their site, on their app, on their email, and on their other messaging and outreach, Danone over a period of time was able to optimize their marketing program based on the inputs that they got from their digital engagement. They were able to achieve 75% average monthly growth and 140% average monthly rebuy, because this is a perishable food product, as you know, and therefore rebuys are as important as the first-time buyers in order to build product loyalty and in order to increase the customers' adherence or affliction towards the Nutritia brand, right? So this is an example of how, starting with very basic steps, a brand could actually create a significant uplift in how they were using digital and how they were using revenue as a core benchmark towards increasing digital conversions. So let's talk about the first step, about goal setting and scoring. I gave you the example of Nutritia, and here is another example of Honda, where the way Honda went about it again was very, very similar to what you just saw. Figure out the strategic objective, right, which is usually always in place, in most organizations. Look at the business objectives, right? We want to sell more cars. We want to increase our service revenue as well, right? So we want to encourage people to buy more and also get their cars serviced more. So the marketing objectives were fairly easy to derive. Get more test drives booked through digital, get more dealership contacts through digital, and then book more services using digital, right? And those lent themselves to digital goals, which were defined very similar to how Nutritia did it in their case. Again, there was a pyramid of scores that was created based on the digital goals. and points were attributed to each action that prospects and customers would take on the website or on the app. A very good example of using rules-based personalization and how you do it is to look at what is going on around you. So, when a visitor enters your website, they reveal a lot of things about, themselves, right? Which site are they coming from? Which device are they using? Which region? Which city? What kind of, if they've come from Google or Bing, what kind of search marketing keywords have they used? If you're running AdWords programs or paid search programs, which keywords have led them to your site, right? What time have they come, which day, what's their IP, which language, and which campaign has referred them to your site. All of this is easily available data points. If you've not been measuring some or all of these, then this could be a very good starting point for you. And these are things which are, which are like commonplace and table stakes data points for every marketer. Now, you can easily define rules around one or more of these digital, fingerprints by creating, default landing pages, personalizing your landing pages or your home pages, right? Based on, either the search keyword that has been used to come to your site or to your landing page, or based on repeat visits. So if a person has come for the second time or third time, you're able to identify through cookies if it's the same device that they're using or if it's coming from the same IP. And, based on what they did in their first visit, you can therefore personalize the experience on their second visit. Similarly, if they're coming from a particular city or region and you have specific offerings or products for that region, you can also, personalize based on that. So there's a variety of things that you can do. If they're coming from a competitor's website or if they're coming from a marketplace, again, if you know that, you're able to create very specific messages in line with where they're coming from. And this is typically called, in the moment personalization, which is based on what's happening around and what kind of indicators are you getting about people who are coming to your properties. Then once people come to your site or they come to your app, they will again leave behind more points which you can, collect. For example, they might be using, a price calculator on your site or a comparison tool, right? They might be searching for something on your site using your website search or your mobile app search. They might be going to a certain kind of pages, and they might be clicking on certain goals that you have already programmed into your system, right? If you have tag management in place, you'll also be able to tell whether certain tags that you have identified and attach them to any existing campaigns that you're running, if they're going to those pages, and if they are going to those pages, what are they doing there, what have they downloaded, what have they read. And in this way, you kind of start building a profile of every visitor, right? And this visitor, although anonymous, you can still build a profile based on their engagement and their behavior on your website or on your app. And as they increase and keep increasing their visits to your app or your site, you can keep profiling and keep gathering information around what they are interested in, what's their behavior like, and and really use that kind of data to be able to personalize the experience for every single or every large segment of prospects or users that are coming to your website or to your mobile app. Now, why am I specifically talking about only website or mobile app? The reason for that is because these are your core digital properties, or landing pages for that matter. These are your core digital properties, and anything that you expect your website users to do is something that you can actually control by using a personalization-based approach. If you lead them to something that they are looking for using personalization, you'll go a great length in being able to convert them into either a subscriber or lead or an actual transaction, depending on whether you're a B2C or a B2B business. If you go back to the Honda example, and this is an actual example of how you actually, go about personalization. If you choose, let's say, 5 or 6 rules, and make sure that the rules that you choose are in alignment with the scores that you have set and the goals that you have set, then once you start using rules, you can do various things on the home page or a landing page of your website. For example, you can personalize the hero image in your banner. You can have a feature spot which you can personalize, right? You can look at giving them the option to choose for a vehicle of their preference, right? And each of these, like I said, should be aligned to your goals and the scores that you have attached to those goals. Because once you start clicking on these personalized spots, you'll be able to measure that and assign scores to their behavior. The third step is around profiling. So like I was explaining that, over a period of time, customers build profiles for themselves, on your site or on your app. It's up to you to record that information and be able to build out, realistic profiles for them. And this is an example of, a known visitor or a customer who may have been unknown a few weeks back, but based on how, she has progressed in her journey on your site, on your app, how she's interacted with your emails or your push notifications, once you gather all that data, you're able to build a picture of every prospect. And once they sign up with you or, reveal themselves or transact on your site, you have their name, you have their phone number, you have their email, and you get to know a lot more about her through her social behavior, right? So over a period of time, this is the kind of profile that should be targeted to be achieved. And this starts from the first time a prospect or a visitor comes to your site or to your app. And the important thing here is that decisions are really not made in straight lines. And I go back to this because, people move from one to the other, from one device to from one channel. And it's not that it's a linear thing. It can crisscross, it can go back and forth. It's become complicated. And trying to decode this is difficult. So what is in marketers' control is to be able to keep a consistent base of personalization across channels and across devices, so that you're able to reach out to the customer at every stage of their journey, whether they're using a mobile device or whether they're using some other form of accessing the internet. So it starts with some very basic steps, simplifying the who and what. What do you want to sell, right? What is likely to be people's budget when they are looking to buy a product or a service from you? And where are they in their buying journey? And if you are able to, get this information, it goes a significant way in, helping your personalization effort. Because once you know that if I'm looking for a certain kind of product, in the case of Honda, I might be looking for a particular kind of product out of the different products that they have, right? And if somebody has clicked on a certain product on the site, and if you're able to record and measure that, you know that this is the vehicle that they are looking for. Then why show them a bunch of other products when you know this person is looking for a particular web product? Similarly, if they're looking at, if they've given you some indicators as to whether whether they are looking for the higher variant or they are looking at a medium variant, again, the answer is right there. It's on your site and it's on the body language that people will exhibit on the site. If you're able to, measure that, you will get your answer right from the engagement that they're showing on your site. You'll get to know by the kind of colors that they choose or the variants that they choose, or the accessories that they choose, as to whether they're looking for a high-end variant or a low-end variant. And then the fact is that if if you're able to figure out where they are in their buying journey, right? And you can figure this out, because if somebody is able to give their location to you, right? And if they are looking at browsing a particular product and spending time around a particular product, then you know that they're probably either middle of funnel or a bit further down in their customer journey. They're definitely not top of the funnel. Otherwise, they wouldn't be spending time on a particular product or revealing their location to you so early on without even subscribing to you. So looking at it, gathering the data points, you understand product preference, you understand where they probably are in their buying journey, and you also get a sense of their budget based on the preferences they show on your site. The next step is to book a test drive. Using this kind of an approach, which is fairly simple, it's not very complicated to implement, Honda saw a 150% increase in test drives over a period of 2 months, 150% more, dealership contacts, and a 30% decrease in bounce, right? And this is based on targeted search. This is not generic bounce, but targeted search, which means that people searching for a certain product or car, right? And these are real numbers that customers have seen when they use basic means of personalization. The point is that all this is great, but the one key factor around personalization is that getting some amount of data in place, and it's a challenge for a lot of marketing organizations, because unless your data is, or at least your key data is not in place or not together, you cannot personalize, you definitely cannot measure, and you cannot report what you can't measure. And that's where the other challenges that I referred to at the top of today's session around key metrics and the marketing sales misalignment around what marketing says is good and what sales says is not that good is around. A lot of that is sourced around the fact that data is not applied properly, and personalization therefore is fractured. And there then you come across similar problems like, well, I really don't know, my cost of new leads is very high. I'm finding it difficult to convert leads, right? Prospects are not really engaging the way I want them to. And then really it becomes a difficult conversation if the basics are not in place, and the basics are all around getting the right data and really ensuring that you have the right means to be able to do effective personalization. Now, an example of good personalization is, looking at a sample customer journey and how it really plays out. And one aspect of that customer journey is around how different systems come into play when we talk about a personalized experience, right? So somebody comes to your site using a search tool, or through an email, or let's say an event invite, comes to your site, right? Comes to a specific landing page, and you're able to once they come to your page, you're able to start profiling them immediately, right? Based on what they're doing on your page. I gave the example of that earlier on how digital body language can be used to start creating profiles, right? And you can immediately start transporting this data into your website platform, and then also start getting it into your CRM as an anonymous lead, right? Once data goes into your CRM, right, it starts forming the basis of a lead. Now, as long as this person is unknown, you can start retargeting them again, right? But because you know what they have been doing on your site or your landing page or your app, you are able to retarget them in a much more effective way, because you can be contextual in what you are showing them in retargeting, right? And then once your retargeting is more contextual, there's likelihood, or much higher likelihood of them actually clicking and reading your retargeted ad or your content. And as soon as you do that, you're again able to tie that back to their profile data. As soon as you tie that back to your profile data, based on their behavior, you can update their score, right? And once you update their score, the data gets updated in your CRM. Now, let's say if this person goes ahead and signs up for a webcast or a conference that you're hosting, right? Again, they become a known visitor now. And since you have their profile already in place, you just append it, update it with their name, an email, and phone number, and you are able to create a single actionable profile, right, against this lead. Further, you also update your CRM and also update their lead score. Now that they have become a known visitor, you can start sending them relevant material through email, through push notifications, through text, etc., or even target them on their social platforms or on their social channels. You can keep nurturing them, and based on whatever they are doing with your communication, you can keep updating the lead score as and when they behave differently. Data keeps getting updated in the CRM all the time, so your systems are updated with respect to customer behavior and how they're interacting with your messages. Finally, let's say they sign up for an event and they come to a conference that you're hosting. Again, lead score gets updated, your data gets updated. They come to the event, they come to your booth, they meet with your sales team there, right? And that's where you transition it to your sales team. So this is a very B2B kind of customer journey, but the illustration here is that how it was, different point of the customer journey and how do you apply personalization across the journey. A lot of marketers feel that this can only be achieved when you talk about you're really getting a huge amount of data in one place, or they talk about big data, etc. But big data is important. It's something that applies to marketing. Really, it's not all about just big data alone. You can start by keeping it really simple and get to a point where you really start aggregating all your data. A lot of marketing organizations are using basic tools like marketing automation, using a CMS or a web marketing platform, and they would definitely be using a CRM. So these are some of the core platforms. And if we talk about an approach where you take your marketing up several notches, what we say is that your revenue engine in terms of maturity moves from whatever you're doing probably currently, which is more using your marketing automation to send out bulk emails or text notifications or sending push notifications if your users are using your app. Instead of that, we move to a quick business win scenario where the approach that I just talked about is captured in the way you do personalization, right? And then we move towards a stage where data comes together and you're able to do more personalized one-on-one marketing. Again, this is not something that takes years to do. It's just about starting out right, taking small steps at a time, and going in an organized way towards achieving personalization-driven marketing. And your core systems all play an important role. Your CMS or your website platform is the one that's your engagement platform. Your marketing automation is basically how you send out your messages, your outbound messages, right? And your CRM is the system that keeps all the score and all the needs. And if all of your channels are working together, it leads to high symphony in terms of how you're using these systems. So getting started, it's fairly simple. You start with what we typically call as a revenue audit or a revenue workshop, where we figure out what you've been doing currently from a digital standpoint and how you have been trying to influence revenue, if at all. establishing some basic alignment between marketing and sales, right? Looking at defining some quick outcomes in terms of, what could be win-win for you, right? And really moving up that roadmap. Defining the metrics that matter is one of the first steps, whether it's cost per lead by channel, or if you want to measure total revenue by campaign type, or ROI by campaign. These are typically some of the key metrics that you would want to measure when you look at revenue. And then establishing the goals, the scores, the engagement that leads to that. All of those factors become very important. And finally, establishing a revenue roadmap becomes extremely important, because that's what leads to the steps that you will take going from today to the next 12 months in order to take what your existing demand generation or digital marketing is and moving to a more data-driven approach. So that was what I had for today's session. Just a very quick introduction to edynamic. So we are a global digital marketing and technology agency focused on customer engagement. We won a slew of awards following the approach around one-on-one marketing and around digital marketing transformation. And what we truly believe is in providing personalized experiences driven by data and technology. Working with some of the best clients globally. And we won a lot of awards over the years for some of the work that we've done. It's been a pleasure talking to you and bringing you this session today. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Please do get in touch with us if you have any questions or queries regarding today's session.